Good evening, my name is Giovanni, and welcome to Face to Face. Tonight, we are talking about homelessness, and we have invited Evelyn Abreu, the Program Director of Miracle Mile Ministries, a church-led organization that works with the unhoused to meet their practical, relational, and spiritual needs. Sounds a lot easier than it is. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Evelyn, thank you so much for coming on the program. We have been doing a series on social issues with the overarching verse of loving God and loving others. And I'm really excited about the conversation that I'm going to have with you as it relates to the work that you are doing here in the city with Miracle Mile. But I know that Miracle Mile wasn't always called Miracle Mile.
Yeah.
It has had a trajectory,
Exactly.
Started 14 years ago. So can you walk us through, I know we're talking to some of the folks watching our, Lion of Judah, but I know there are other people who are not from Lion of Judah. And just kind of take us through kind of how it got started and where the organization is now with the work that you're doing here.
Amen. Thank you, Giovanni, for having me. I think it's a beautiful theme that you're focusing on, and I'm very honored to be here with you. Yeah. So Miracle Mile started as a street outreach, a very small street outreach, by a brother named Danny. And Danny had come to Lion of Judah and had come to know the Lord, and Jesus really transformed his life. He went from being a drug addict to just being getting his life back completely. He had lost his family, everything. And he now was a paramedic. And so he drove around the city of Boston, around Miracle Mile, and he saw faces. He kept seeing faces. And he tells us that he knew that he had to go out there and, give by grace what he had already received, that they needed to know about Jesus and that he needed to help meet some of the needs and just love on people. And that's what he did with his family. And he did that for a while, and the Lord just sort of provided for him, and other people joined him. And then little by little, they brought it closer to the church just to make it feel more like the church is, taking care of you. And just because there was so many other people going out, they centralized it here in the corner. And eventually, I think they were out there for a couple of years. I never joined when we were in the corner, although God was calling me, and I knew that. So eventually they came indoors about 10 years ago now. It's going to be 10 years that they came indoors, and it's become more of a church on Saturdays for folks. Some in the neighborhood, some at the shelters, some who literally slept right on the sidewalk the night before.
Yeah.
All sorts of from different walks of life.
Yeah, and just so that everyone knows what Miracle Mile is and the stretch of road that encompasses, it is the Massachusetts Avenue and Melnia Cass mile and the surrounding area in that intersection.
Amen. Yeah, and so the name came about in a prayer group because this has been deemed methadone mile because of the services for folks experiencing issues with homelessness and experience, a struggle with drug addiction. So it was called methadone mile, right? By the world, it's called a methadone mile. And at a prayer meeting, even before it was called Miracle Mile, someone said, we need to change the name, and just declared over it, it was Miracle Mile. And we were already starting to see some miracles, and miracles with names on them. But definitely that, during the pandemic, things really, a lot of things really shaped up for the ministry. And even though the whole world was folding down, Miracle Mile was folding up and growing, and being able to organize more, and folks coming on that were more administrative. And we had a crew of maybe 12 people from Symphony Church and Antioch Church, who are the core churches of now what we call Miracle Mile, because it's a multi-church. It's no longer the street ministry of Lion of Judah. It's a multi-church, collaboration of churches to minister in the city to folks that need it. And one of the miracles, I think one of the biggest miracles this year for me, it's eye-opening, although we could see it coming, is how all the churches have come together as one united body. And with no limits, that we're just there to preach Jesus, and like we're not advertising anyone's church.
Right.
We're advertising Jesus. Like that's who the love of Jesus is, what we're there for.
Yeah.
And so that's been a big part of the miracle for me. Like, oh, I always thought the miracles were us ministering to the guests and them coming to Jesus, because it is hard to leave some of those things, and it is hard to get your life back together when it's in shambles. But with God, it's possible.
Yeah. And you didn't necessarily reach out to these churches to become a part of it. It was something that they were prompted by the Holy Spirit to come alongside
very
and
organically
begin to work.
Exactly. Very organically happened right before the pandemic, probably a year before, that churches started showing up and asking, can we help? Can we be part of it? Symphony Church, I believe, was the first one to come help. And it's a church of young adults at Boston University. I actually went to Boston University, right by Boston University, and mostly Asian folks. And they just added such a beautiful component to it. Yeah. And from then on, they just kept coming, like little by little. And during the pandemic, I more understood why. Yeah. Like, why are they coming from different churches? This is so weird. It is beautiful to come together. It is more challenging as a director, honestly, because everybody else is at different places. It's not like you could say, hey, let's meet after church. We do have a core of Line of Judah people, but some of the leaders are at other churches. But I think we've all learned to navigate that and find the beauty of it, and sort of find the strengths of each of the the core churches. And it's beautiful to see how each church has a culture, like literally, like how you could see some of the same administrative gifts at Antioch, and Symphony has a lot of pastoral gifts, and they have different, but you can tell. I sometimes say, I gotta go see what you guys are drinking over there, like see what word you're learning and what you're learning. And I felt like Line of Judah was more like the prophetic church, the down to earth church. Yeah. So it's beautiful to see the different cultures of the churches.
So you're the director of Miracle Mind.
I'm officially now the program director. I tried to avoid that for a long time, but and I already gave like most of my life to this work as soon as I came.
Now tell us why. What drew you in particular to this work? And that's a question I always ask the people who have are sitting right where you are. It's like, why did you become involved in this particular issue?
In this issue, right? I think even since high school, I think growing up, even though I wasn't a Christian, my dad was really mindful of showing us poverty. And like we'd go to Dominican Republic and he showed us the little kids that were sort of on the streets that didn't have clothes. And so he was always very mindful of teaching us that. And not only just teaching us that they existed, but teaching us how to help them. So like helping them take a shower and like giving them shoes, and then they would be so happy. Like you could see how you can make a difference in someone's life by just caring for them and caring for their needs. So that was always something in me. I was supposed to be a lawyer. That didn't happen because at some point I decided, oh, no. I was studying political science and I was like, oh, no, this is all like lies. And like, I'm not going to do this. So I did study economics, and then I had my own issues, like my own battles before I knew the Lord. Yeah. And I ended up in a hospital. And in that hospital, I got to know the Lord. And from then on, the Lord just transformed my life. And I stopped thinking about who God was. How could it be questioning? I just had faith. I was able to just understand who God was and have faith. And in that process, I felt because I reached so low, I even got more empathetic for like other people, especially people struggling with mental health issues. And we grew up in the inner city, right? And so there was always crimes and drugs, and I hated drugs. I hated drinking. So I was never tempted to use. Nobody ever offered, but I knew my friends were. Yeah. And I call a window to homelessness and a window to poverty, because I lived in a comfortable apartment in Jamaica Plain, but I could see from my window people selling drugs and people like suffering. So I would always look out, and it's something that I always sort of wanted to like do or solve. And then somebody said, "Oh, there's a shelter, and they need a." I wasn't working at the time. They need someone to take care of the kids, and it ended up being a program called the Nurturing Program at Elizabeth Stonehouse, and so that's a transitional housing program for women and children with mental health issues. Yeah. And I didn't even know that, and I was already sort of like in that wanting to understand more, and in that mentality of wanting to help others because God had helped me get out of that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working there for 10 years in the shelter as a family advocate. So instead of a lawyer, I was now a family advocate. So I have that experience. In the church, I had always worked with children, but then I realized how much everybody was working with children, and not everybody was working with the folks on the street. And like, even thinking about the folks in the buildings near us, not just the poor folks, but like folks that are affluent that don't know about Jesus. And I'm like, I want them to know and experience what I have. God just put that in me. Like, I have to. I mean, the more you read the Bible, it's like that's what you have to do. And I felt like this urgency to do that. For 2 years, I avoided it.
Yeah.
For 2 years, I just said, oh, I read the newsletter, because it used to be a newsletter.
Yeah.
Oh, the Saturday outreach, I probably should go. I need to go. And I would even bump into like Danny's wife, who would buy, she would pick up Panera bread for the breakfasts. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna come, and I never showed up. One Saturday, after going through some personal struggles and like losing some things in my life, God just kind of removed people from my life, and I said, I need to go. After months of like struggling, I need to just go. And I just showed up.
Yeah.
And that day they were restructuring the ministry because Danny had moved on to do other things. And Pastor Greg, who had already been my leader as children minister, he was the leader. And they were meeting to restructure the ministry. I'm like, okay, I guess I should be here. So I started by picking up Panera bread, which I had already experience with, because I used to get bread and like just give it to people like in the church or around the neighborhood. And I always prayed to be able to do something in the basement that would help people. That for years I used to just go to the basement like, we should do something in this basement. Later it happens. And when I finally joined, I experienced a different level of joy, a different level of freedom. And I just did dishes sometimes because nobody wanted to do the dishes because the water was cold. And I'm like, I can do dishes with cold water. We did it in DR and Dominican Republic, right? My aunt taught me how to do that. So I did dishes for a while, and then I slowly became a coordinator. And then there was a lot of leaders. It was not just one leader. We sort of took turns on different things. And then during the pandemic, because we ended up being only 12 of us, I sort of ended up taking the role of the director anyway.
Yeah.
And so then Pastor Sam and Pastor Miranda asked me to come on as official director, just so that we can grow the ministry, that it was a great ministry, but just so we can take it to different levels and sort of give it a structure, But it honestly, it still does what it's always done, just love on people.
Good morning, I'm Jerome. This is the line of Judah. Was an alcoholic, was a drug addict. I was living in Rhode Island for about 12 years and had a couple of strokes. Then all of a sudden, the state of Rhode Island wouldn't take care of me anymore because I kept abusing their funds, I guess. People came to me and helped me come here to Boston. And Boston Medical Hospital, it's across the street over here, provided me the help. And then I had to move into the shelter, 112 Southampton. And 500 people roaming about. Most of them are drinking and smoking cigarettes and smoking crack. And you have no idea if you're gonna wake up in the morning or... But God took care of me. Let me rest. He let me rest so well. Through that, a gentleman, he also was homeless. He came to Line of Judah to give them a hand in cooking and invited me to come here. I've been here for 3 years and I have not left. I want to stay here, always. Volunteering is just a way for me to give back, and I love it. It gives me strength, gives me something to do. I am retired, but it gives me something to do every day. To come and do something with God, to let people know about Jesus. It's a wonderful thing, and it has helped me. It's gave me sanity. I mean, now I can understand why people are on their church all the time, because it feels like home. It feels like home, man.
That we have a breakfast on Saturday, and we bring folks in from all around Miracle Mile. all from all walks of life, guests and volunteers. And we have a church, basically a church service with worship, music, prayer, a small word, 10-minute word, encouragement. We also provide clothing if they need it, hygiene products, resources. We're working on the resource part. That's something that it's a challenge to find the resources, and it's a challenge to plug folks in who are in so much distress or trauma to some services sometimes. They just have so much going on. And so we're working on being able to follow up more. We just created a follow-up team. But basically, that's sort of the main happening at Miracle Mile. That breakfast that just draws in people from all over the place, and we're there to just befriend people and love on them and see them come to Christ, and hopefully like folks like Jerome and Geronimo and some others. I can say those names because they've been public about their situations. Some others just, now come to the churches, and I'll say churches because now they go to the different churches. We have someone that goes to Symphony Church, and he loves it there. And just see them grow.
One of the things that struck me as you were talking about your own journey and why you sort of ended up doing what you're doing now, and kind of the journey that God took you through. That's sort of not necessarily a running theme, but a thread. And this is just the amazing God that we serve. The fact that your own personal experiences and the way in which you view the people that you serve, and having experienced perhaps mental health yourself, and then your dad kind of teaching you about having compassion for others. That all of these things that God has used in your work now, with with how you view them, and your compassion and your empathy and your desire to see them become whole persons, to come out of the homelessness that they're experiencing, or combat the substance use that they may be experiencing, or whatever other issues that they're going through, is that lens through which you view everyone from Miracle Mile. It gives you that empathy and that love,
definitely,
which is what we're talking about, for this particular series. And so I'm thankful that you have talked about kind of your own experience, because that's such a huge part of a lot of the work that people who go into specific areas, without even realizing it, sometimes that's God is just going to bring all that stuff to bear as you're doing your work, right? So tell me a little bit, just for the people who are watching, what do you see as the biggest kind of contributor to people experiencing homelessness?
Amen. It's definitely something dear to me. I think I see the biggest contributor is people feeling a loss of identity, not knowing who they are, not having received sort of like the love that they need at some point, and knowing who they are, who they belong to, who they can be. Also another thinking is just sort of like victim thinking, instead of, thinking this is temporary and I can get out of this, like not hopelessness, also namelessness and hopelessness before experiencing homelessness. Those are definitely a common thread. Definitely mental health issues like trauma, childhood trauma, trauma just even growing up, or trauma later on in life, domestic violence. There's so many things that could contribute to it. But definitely those are some of the threats that I see. I've always said, though, like that me being in the hospital and sort of some of the things I went through were the biggest university I could have had in life. Like the biggest lessons were there. And I think from going to like being a college student, like with a full scholarship at a school in Boston, to being in a hospital and like not knowing if I would ever be able to even read a book again. I think that helped me understand that anybody could slip at any moment, and that it's important, like the experiences that they have in that traumatic season, in that difficulty that they're going through. Like there were people there that didn't know me, that were there for me, folks that and this church was there for me when I got here, and they understood me, and they helped me in my healing journey back to healing. And I honestly feel happier now after knowing the Lord and doing this work than I have ever had in my whole life. Like I feel like like I couldn't have planned this for my own self.
Yeah.
And it is so rewarding that no amount of money could, like when you see a face that you saw almost dying and then you see them worshiping the Lord, it's like it just has a huge reward.
Yeah. Tell me about, because this, it's been in the news, and it is definitely part of what has been happening within the homeless community, and that is, right, the government and how politicians have been trying to address,
Right.
the issue. You're coming at the issue from a faith perspective, which is the perspective that we have, and because we believe, right, that these things are both sort of kind of practical in a sense, but also spiritual. There is a spiritual component to some of these things that they're experiencing, and we know as believers that there's definitely a spiritual component. But talk to us about what some of the steps that both in other states and here they've been taking, and what your views on those are, and have they helped the situation? Are the people experiencing homelessness better off because of those things? So just give us some perspective now. And one of the reasons I ask is because of the recent case, and I'm trying to remember what state it was, but that criminalized sleeping on the streets. And so now that specific law is being used, particularly from what I recall in California, to try to deal with the issue of homelessness. And there are many other states, that are dealing with, it's a crisis in our country right now. And so whatever perspective that you have or something you can shed light on what's happening both here and then kind of around the nation, that would be really helpful.
That's a great
for
subject.
us to know.
It's a great topic. So I can speak from Boston and sort of seeing the trajectory of what the city's been trying to do. It is a crisis, and it's a very difficult crisis to deal with. Folks are very, very ill, and folks have reached, some of them, a very bottom place in their lives. Boston is very cold, so by nature they'll find places to, they'll want to go to shelters at some point. I can't imagine in California where they can just be out all the time. I can see how people want to stay out there. But the city has been trying really hard. I think even through these 9 years, like I've seen they're very concerned, and especially Mayor Wu. I mean, she did a great job closing down the engagement center. And I was part of that. Like they asked the churches, this is the first time the administration has asked the churches to be part of a process with this, with the folks experiencing homelessness and this crisis. And so we did sit at the table and be able to give an opinion, but we also were part of the move. Like we volunteered to help move the tents when they moved the tents. And it was a very practical thing. It was a very practical operation where people really got offered alternatives one at a time. And I think that's it. We really have to deal with this issue one person at a time. We cannot blanket answer this. Like there's not a blanket answer. We can't just, knock down everything and be like, okay, it's going to go away. It's going to keep surfacing because there are so much deep-rooted trauma and so much. And when people hear that there's services in Boston, they navigate here. So even when we've taken care of the people here, they keep coming back, almost like the Bethesda pool, where they knew there was healing and they would sit around. And so it is a problem of the heart, the mind, the soul. And I think that the city, of course, this is, the separation of church and state. The city knows how to do what they can do. And there's people of God in the city, working in the city, but there is separation of state and church. And so they want to take care of the more practical needs in terms of, the shelter and, and maybe finding them treatment. But it's really just failed over and over because it's not dealing with the person as a whole. This last move, they did sort of work more. I remember the last tents, there was a family there, a man and a woman in the tents, because what happened is people started putting up tents and it became tent city. It was very dangerous. People got raped in there, killed. Versus when people were just, hanging out and going to the shelters.
Right.
It was bad, but it got worse. It was really bad. It was very bleak. And there's people in there. There's people's sons and daughters and people's aunts and uncles. And it's not a problem of this is a group of people. There's individuals with different stories. Yeah. And so I think they took a good approach this time. And however, and it was to a lot of folks said it. It's gonna just spread. And so I automatically saw just like even at Park Street, more people just wandering the streets and sort of when they were at the engagement center in Boston, there was services there. They had bathrooms. They got like safety things. There was police there. There was social workers around to work with them and health agencies that would come by. So there was, in a sense, it was something for them to own. It was like their little city. And for them, they were like in a community. A lot of the folks felt in community there. It was hindering some of the work for the shelter that's there at 112. So it was a hindrance and it was a danger to the city. So when the tents became, it needed to be. But what has happened is that it spread. Yeah. And one of the big things I see also is that because these are huge shelters that we have, like Pine Street, it's a wonderful shelter, but it's a lot of people in there. Yeah. And so people cannot get their needs met because there's so many people and there's such a crisis in there. And so when they sent people to I forgot the number, I think it's 675 here, Mass Ave, they sent 30 people there. I think they were able to then be in a smaller environment where staff could sort of work closer with people. Yeah. I do think the shelter system is so overwhelmed. So we pray for the shelter workers. Yeah. We pray for the city workers and the police officers, because if we think it's hard, they're out there every day, and they're out there meeting some of the basic needs and trying to, they're saving lives too. Like people are having overdoses, some really bad drugs out there right now, really, really bad drugs. And so the city has to continue to, the faith-based organizations be part of it so that people can have the city will have other support networks, but the people will have other support networks. And if that soul doesn't heal inside from the trauma, from the hurt, and we know Jesus heals, we have millions of people to prove what Jesus has done in our lives. So going in there with the scalpel of the Lord, of the Word, of Jesus, it's a huge help. Yeah. And so I'm just glad that this mayor has accepted the help of the church and will continue. Now I'm hoping that we sit back at the table again and see, the new issues. I feel like it should just be an ongoing committee, an ongoing sort of agency to deal with the experiences, the homelessness that people experiencing homelessness are facing. Yeah.
Now, just share with us, since you were part of this last kind of round of, the answer that came from the mayor's office, was part of that answer providing homes to some of the unhoused along the Mass and Cass corridor? Right. Or was it bringing them to shelters outside of the city, or was it a combination of solutions?
Everybody had, definitely a combination. It was very holistic, very practical. Even the NCAA was there, the Civil Liberty and the cadets, like the firemen. They had a lot of social workers working individually with people. They had a list of people. And they knew, the social workers, I could tell, had done a lot of work with these people for months. Yeah. So they were working already with months, getting to know them, getting to know their needs. And they sort of divided up people. One of the things that definitely showed me that they were being compassionate and really working to find the right place for each person is, I started saying, and I forgot to say it, one of the last tents was a couple, a Latino couple, and they had a little dog, and they would not go anywhere. They had all these wonderful offers of places, but they wouldn't go anywhere because none of those places accepted the dog.
Yeah.
And the city was working. They were literally working, zeroing on something to find them to be able to go with their little dog. And so they also gave people sort of incentives, and they gave people buckets to put their things in, and a lot of people had a hard time letting go of stuff. Even though it was raining, pouring, and things were wet, and like there was a lot of things because people hold on to their things, you know, because they don't have a place. So like these things are important to them, and so they had to put it in 3 buckets, but pretty big buckets. And so the city put it in, promised to put it in, and what do you call it, storages. And so then they knew where their storages were. So they were being very practical, and they also tried to, if people had family, find their family and say, hey, could you go back home? If people needed to go into treatment, they would, you know, put them into treatment. Treatment is a whole other subject. Treatment is very difficult. It's very, you know, it's a sort of a little bit cold too to go to some treatment. We have found treatment centers that are good with people. Not all of them. I'm not going to blanket state that, but it is very difficult. That system is very difficult to, when somebody makes a decision and goes there, they could go through a 3-day detox, but then afterwards they're like, what do I do now? And then they might go right back to the streets usually.
You know, as you were mentioning kind of the environment that the Mass and Cass area had become, last week we had Mary Speta from Amira, who is the executive director, and they work with women who have been commercially trafficked. And she mentioned that actually they have a lot of women who have come from Mass and Cass, in fact. And so I'm wondering if you know, had seen or knew of women who had experienced, you know, sex trafficking or you know, what were some of those things happening in that area in addition to you know, the drug trafficking that was happening over there, if you have any sense of
Definitely. We see a trend for sure. We see more men than women at our breakfast just because we have Rosie's Place as neighbors. And they're doing a great job over there. Like I always say, I wish I could just clone them, like just start popping them all around the city, especially for men. They've really gotten it together through the years on how to help women and how to, you know, support them. So we see more men, but we do definitely see there are people who are actually trafficking women that have stepped through our doors, and we later find that out. But we treat everybody the same, and we've heard women who their own father trafficked them, and like you know, used them to sell their bodies, and like, or abused them. Men that are still abusing women, and they come in. So it definitely is a trend, you know, that there's women who are sex trafficking right now because they're out there and they need the money, or they just, even because they need the community around them, and they're sort of trapped in that.
Now, tell me, as the Church of Jesus, is there something in particular that you would love to say to the people listening about how our posture and our view should be toward those who are unhoused? You know, oftentimes when we see people who are, you know, maybe unhoused or experiencing homelessness, and then there's also mental health issues, and then in addition to substance use, you know, issues, our natural response sometimes, and we want to make sure that people stay safe, right, is sort of to skirt around a lot of these, a lot of people who may be experiencing those things, or to not really deal with that. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on our, you know, what our posture and our response ought to be.
It's very difficult to see some people, especially when they you know, they have a lot going on, like if they have mental health issues. So I know that you know, when you're stopped at a traffic light and you got to go to work and people are trying to ask you for money, we don't personally give people money. We just point them to the resources. So I'm going to say there's a city number called, I don't know what it's called, but it's 311. And if you see somebody who needs services, you don't necessarily have to do things for them. I would say the first thing you want to do is just be cordial. It's okay to be afraid. I think it's part of the response, but just sort of just try to discern, especially the people of Christ, if this person is safe or not. And just say hi. It's okay to just, even get their name and say, I'm going to pray for you. I don't have money, but I'm going to pray for you. Or I know some people carry around like, and I don't do it as much, and I should do more, little care packages or graham crackers or something, little packages of Oreo cookies. They really love sugar. Folks out there love sugar. We all do, right?
The unhealthy stuff.
Oreo cookies, and they might just need water. One of the things I do, and I've had to pray sometimes, because even though I work with the population, like if I'm alone especially, I think when we're in partnership with the other brothers and sisters, it's way easier to go talk to people and pray for them and sort of find out their needs, what they're going through and what they might need. But I just recently had an issue where I was alone. I had just dropped everybody off, and this person was camped out in the front, but I really felt that he needed something. So I prayed, and I said from far away, I said, brother, do you need anything? He said, yeah, I really need ice. I said, okay, I can get you ice. And I went into the church and got him ice. Apparently he had one of those new drugs that, is giving people sort of rashes and all sorts of things on there. And he was so grateful, and I gave him water, and I didn't have food. And I was able then to talk to him about God. I stayed at a distance, but I just try to act natural because I did feel that I needed to talk to him. Other moments I feel like, no, he doesn't need me to talk to him right now. Or if he's sleeping, definitely. If someone is sleeping, just let them sleep. Like, don't wake them. I wouldn't recommend waking them up, kicking them out. If they're sleeping, let them sleep. I know people do put water next to them. They don't always want food, and I know that's the first thing that we think. A lot of times they want money, some for food or for needs, but some is for drugs, and that's why we don't give them money. That's why we point them to the services. And so if you see someone, you definitely want to see if they're breathing. If you see somebody in emergency situations, if they are breathing, so that you can call 911, because you could be saving their lives. There's something called Narcan that they could Narcan them, and if they're having an overdose. But I think that for those of us who now have a church that has people that are experiencing homelessness come to be part of the church, or just people who are, in desperate need, I think just getting to know them and getting to know their stories, and not even having to solve anything, or pointing them to the people that can help them, because not everybody is gifted the same way. And just as if somebody walked into church and they wanted to be part of the audio sound ministry, you'd point them there, right? That same way, point them to the people at the church that are social workers, that are, that maybe know about jobs or know about houses. But definitely, if they need a shelter, you call 311, and they'll have a list of shelters to go to. I know that now there's about 2 brothers and sisters in the churches that are, two sisters now, and maybe a brother that are housing folks that were experiencing homelessness. And those 2 people were in different places. Then, there's a spectrum. Like, some people are in crisis and experiencing homelessness. Some people are already stable. They just need a home to continue to be more stable and to get everything else together. So there's 2 sisters in the church that are currently housing people. And it's made a difference. Like, everyone's like, oh, so-and-so's changed a lot. Yeah, they've been sleeping for a month in a warm bed, because some people don't sleep. So you might see them acting out in church even. It's because they didn't sleep last night. It might not be drugs. If they're going to church every Sunday, they're definitely looking for God, because they could be anywhere. And there's a lot of places to go to even to get food. Like we say, when they come to the basement, our fellowship hall in the basement, it's because they know it's a church, and it's because they know they want more of God, because there's all sorts of soup kitchens around, and the shelters have food. And so they really want to experience the love of Christ, and they want to be in fellowship with the people. So we sort of really need people to be friends with those people, and just, point them to other resources, point them to experiences that they probably never had. Some of them, or they've had and they haven't had in a long time. Because a lot of folks also, I didn't touch on the immigrant part. A lot of folks have come from Venezuela and Haiti and different countries. and they don't have family here, and now they're sort of with a promise. Somebody might have made them a promise, and now they're sort of no place to live, no family, and so they need just love and support.
Yeah. And you're talking specifically about the refugee community.
The refugee
that has
community.
Come
We've been seeing a
to
lot of
Boston.
refugees coming to Boston, but also to our breakfast as well, like to the church. And those folks, they're in a different situation, but they need basically the same thing. They need attention, love, and care and guidance.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I asked is because, as you said, once sort of the tent and the encampments were taken away, what has happened over time is that the population has scattered in different places. And I say this because on Sundays, I'm noticing more and more, and if you come to Lion of Judah, you have seen this happen more and more, is that there are many more people now along Reed Street. And so we are seeing them on the way to church. Right. And so...
And the needles.
And the needles and other things. But what our Christian response, and sometimes it's just a matter of like, even if we don't say anything, but what I have been experiencing and sort of, telling myself, they were created in the image of God. And so even if I don't say anything, the mental calculus that I'm making in my mind is, I see you, I'm not judging you.
Right.
I value you as a person. I know that you are more than what you are maybe engaging in right now.
Exactly.
And so that is the posture that at least I'm teaching myself.
That's beautiful.
As well. Yeah. And so because they are so close to us, particularly, in the Lion of Judah, we cannot avoid them.
Right.
But what is God trying to show us, each one of us who are members of Lion of Judah, and how to view with new eyes, with the eyes of Jesus, those people who are around us that need us to see them, And so I love that you mentioned that about, just how we treat them.
Right. It reminds me of Matthew 25 when the Lord says, I was hungry and you fed me. I needed clothes and you gave me clothes.
Yeah.
It's almost like you should. I love that posture of, because they feel it. They feel that you're not, oh my God.
Yeah.
Or like, oh.
Exactly.
There's different postures that you could take, and that's a beautiful posture. Like, I try to see, like, this is someone's daughter. This could be my daughter. This could be me.
Yeah.
And I definitely think we should think this could be Jesus, like, because it is Jesus, because he said in his word, whatever you do to these folks, you do to me, right? And so it's that, and we represent him, like, and so we should really definitely tremble when we see folks like that, and start to sort of normalize thinking that way, that they're just people like us. And then if we get close to them, we might even hear a similar story to us. Yeah. Some of them might have even went to the same high school as you. Yeah. You don't even know that. Like, lived in your same neighborhood and had similar stories. I've heard stories of Catholic girls who were out there, and they're just like, right now in bad shape, but they were just Catholic girls in a school and fell in love with the wrong guy, and their lives spiraled from there. And sometimes, so it's good to try to find like I think it's good to have a posture, like because we're going to keep seeing it. Yeah. So I love that you're taking that approach, and I think we should do that, each of us. And like, we know where we can and where we can't, like you lead a women's ministry, so I'm sure you'll see some of them there. Yeah. And having that posture definitely of, they're just like me. Yeah. And they need me. That's the other thing. Not that you're just like us, but they need us to know who Jesus is.
The community.
One of the pastors said recently, Ian, like, he met a woman on the street, and she's like, I don't know who God is, and I've never seen him, and I don't know how he acts. And it's like, he said to her, you haven't seen God, but you see me. He sent me here. Yeah. And then later she came to the breakfast, and she had these wonderful experiences, and she was able to understand who God was. And he told us, like, we are his representatives, so whatever we do to them, it's how they're going to know Jesus, how they're going to know him.
Yeah, right.
So, So
our actions speak often louder than our words.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the quote that someone said a long time ago about preaching the gospel, and sometimes I use words.
I like that. That's beautiful. Yeah.
So, Evelyn, thank you so much
Thank you for having me.
coming to talk to us, for shining a light on the ministry and the work that you are doing.
Thank you.
For the people around us who are unhoused and homeless. And I just pray that God would continue to bless you, that God would continue to bring more volunteers, more
Yes.
churches. It's the work is big, but we serve a God who is bigger.
Amen.
And
Amen.
so I just pray that He would continue to bless you and all of the people that you're working with.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for having me, and Line of Judah for just helping Miracle Mile just thrive and keep going, like being committed to this. Our senior pastor was so committed to this. I want to thank Victory Outreach too, for being a partner church that's also helping us do the work. Symphony, Antioch, but honestly, we could not do this with all the volunteers. I think we had 149 different ministries and churches, including colleges too, that have been joining us. And the support is just beautiful. Like, it just touches my heart when we go around the circle every Saturday and we hear the different churches and ministries. And I couldn't do it without all the other people. Like, we couldn't do this work. And we just, praying to be able to reach more and do more. It is a lot, but we keep doing it. And until Jesus tells us to stop or he comes back.
Amen. Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's program. I really appreciated just your depth of knowledge on this issue, which is really more of a human issue. It's a social issue, but both a human issue. And if you have been listening, and if the Holy Spirit has been touching your heart to get involved with Miracle Mile Ministries, I really pray that you would consider bringing your time, your talent, and your treasure to this organization. They are doing amazing work here in the city, and it is a space that surrounds our church. We are encountering it every day. So I just pray that if the Lord is nudging you to get involved, that you will get involved. Thank you so much for tuning in. I pray that God has blessed you by this conversation, and I will see you next time.